Thank you for the invitation to speak. ICU clinical information systems, safe or not? Possible conflicts of interest. I've been involved with the New South Wales State Clinical Information Project since its inception over a decade ago, and I was medical lead of the clinical work group involved in its configuration and now rollout. Sean Kelly, I don't know if he's in the audience, recently suggested I was wedded to what is now called ERIC, but I don't recall a wedding, and there was certainly no honeymoon. I've been one of the pioneer SIS owners, a different product to ERIC, for over 25 years, and emphatically I've not received $1 or trip from any of the vendors, and I can't say the same for some of the public servants I know involved in EMR projects. On reviewing the literature, one can find evidence both good and bad about the safety and efficacy of clinical information systems. So I'm going to present my experience and my view. A clinical information system is much more than an electronic medical record. It gathers a huge amount of data and needs a lot more IT support and infrastructure than a mere computerised version of the notes. It needs to take into account human factor principles in its design and presentation of data and present the data in a useful way to streamline clinical workflow. Clinicians must be involved in the configuration, and this is why a lot of early SIS products failed. IT boffins simply do not think like clinicians. All data should be easy to read, a clinically meaningful display of physiological data with readily variable timelines and clear abnormal values. A great advantage of a SIS is it allows simultaneous access to patient information both at the bedside and remotely. And a SIS should provide expert decision support for clinical decision making, promote easy access to data for quality assurance and routine ICU management activities, and interface with ICU equipment and integrate with hospital systems. And it must allow ongoing modifications, as it's not static but a living beast. And if these things are not addressed, patients' cares may be compromised. And I've given you a sort of a report card on our ERIC system in New South Wales on the right side. One of the major decisions we made in New South Wales was to go for a best of breed for ICU rather than an enterprise or hospital-wide system. And if you go for best of breed, you really need IT support to integrate the system, and vendors can make this hard for you. If you go for enterprise-wide, you must accept less scope. In the United States, having been burnt by enterprise-wide systems developed by IT gurus, the government this year enacted the 21st Century Healthcare Act, and it has forced companies to produce interoperable and integratable systems through financial incentives. This approach acknowledges that IT systems never remain static, and some areas such as intensive care have specific needs. I wish governments here would adopt the same approach. So where are we in New South Wales for our statewide best of breed approach? Hot off the press from lunchtime today, just to update these figures, 9,500 patients have been through ERIC. Just think of the data you could analyse. 12 ICUs and 247 ICU beds, and the rollout continues. At a state level, we have switched to business as usual in terms of governance, and we review ERIC functionality weekly through a robust partnership of clinicians and IT people. Clinician involvement is vital in configuration, and otherwise you can get into indiscriminate data display that impedes our decision making and can predispose to clinical errors and lead to data fatigue. ERIC endeavours to give clinicians meaningful and accessible display of data, and we are tweaking our design regularly. And this simple error where we configured initially the progress notes over the systems and radiology mixed up with medications We've since altered it to bring the add progress notes over read progress notes and radiology in with tests and results. And we're doing ongoing refinement to make workflows easier. Your SIS hardware can promote safety. And at St George, we've gone with computers on wheels throughout. And mindful of infection control risks with keyboards and touch screens, we've sourced a completely washable system. The keyboard, the mouse, the screens, the lot, all are cleanable, and there's even height adjustment. Within the patient room, we have a dedicated computer on wheels rather than a fixed screen, so that you can move 360 degrees and view the patient in the room and possibly the patient in the room next door. But a note of when we have additional cows that come on the ward round with us, allowing for notes to be viewed at the same time as physiology and radiology, etc. But a note of caution. We discovered early on that too many cows and very keen junior medical staff can lead to disaster with dual notation and duplicate prescribing. So we've become very rigorous about role assignment at the beginning of all clinical rounds. Any clinical information system can be let down by the poles and wires, and I use the fibre to node analogy of NBN, which in my view has been a disaster. The IT platform for ERIC is Citrix. I'm not an IT person, but Citrix carries a number of computer systems for health on it. And ERIC data is then housed on two big databases which are many miles from my local health district. In my local health district, when more ICUs went live, our ERIC slowed down, and this impacted on the day-to-day ICU practice, and the impact on patient care was quite substantial. And I think the IT gurus grossly underestimated the amount of data an ICU can generate compared with the simple electronic record. It took some negotiation to get this acknowledged and addressed. IT infrastructure must support rapid SIS responsiveness. Don't become caught up with the SIS at the expense of direct patient care. Bring the SIS to the bedside and integrate equipment as much as possible. And in this photo you can see the ventilator, the ECMO circuit and the monitors are all integrated, saving documentation time. Use the SIS as an adjunct to direct patient care, not instead of direct patient care. There is evidence that when you introduce a clinical information system, if you're not careful, you can reduce significantly communication between nursing and medical staff. And this was reported in 2015 study in the British Medical Journal of Quality and Safety, that there was a 20% reduction in the communication between nursing and medical staff, and they lost agreement in clinical care plans as a result. So in our unit we have daily huddles to enforce meetings between the ICU team and the SIS is involved, but it doesn't usurp this process of human interaction. There is no perfect e-prescribing system for ICU. The medication system within ERIC has perhaps been the most controversial part. And the scientific literature has several sad tales of increased risks with electronic prescribing. This is a June 2018 coronial report where 2 medical records were opened up in a theatre at the same time. A narcotic was prescribed on the wrong patient with disastrous consequences. With ERIC, we have aimed to give a growing raft of decision support, and that's an ongoing process. There's no doubt that having an electronic prescription, medication orders are clear, legible and much safer overall. And there is better accessibility to medication charts, which means that your pharmacist can do more checking, and the key is to really get the funding for additional pharmacy support. Patients being treated in ICU are at high risk of medication errors. There's a great number of medications compared to the wards, greater use of intravenous medications and inability of patients to interact over medication use. And while the results in the literature are mixed, electronic prescribing overall does seem to decrease the risk. In 2015, nearly all the USA hospitals had electronic prescribing, and when that was studied, they found that there was a reduction in errors, but errors remained, and what happened was the spectrum of errors had changed, and the commonest ones were wrong drug and wrong dose. And this has been similarly seen in our rollout of e-meds in New South Wales. You cannot take the human element out of meds reconciliation. And mindful of this, the state group wrote a document on medication safety for intensive care patients focused on transition of care in and out of ICU. And here's the authors. And one of them, David Schell from the Westmead Children's, studied the impact of the introduction of electronic prescribing in his paediatric ICU, and he found a 50% reduction in rates of medication errors using their electronic prescribing system. And at St George, our junior medical staff raised concerns about the impact of interruption by various staff members while they were trying to reconcile medications. And we actually had some quite serious errors. So we've introduced these high-vis vests with "Do Not Disturb" written on them at their request, and that seems to be helping. Assist should inform and facilitate safety and quality endeavours. Here is the sepsis view showing the patient's vitals, pathology, results, inotropes, antibiotics, and they're displayed to promote early recognition of developing sepsis and easy tracking of the response to treatment. And it's easy to graph values on the fly to provide readily digestible information for better decision making. What if Assist fails? Assist will fail. It's good to have Assist manager, to have a plan and keep some paper charts. A lesson learned from the French and Belgian terrorist attacks was that SISs are not safe in mass casualties. IT systems get overwhelmed and you need to revert to whiteboards and papers for mass casualty situations. There is no doubt the first generation of EMRs, particularly in the USA, did not have a positive impact on patient care and clinician sanity. And described in detail in this New England Journal Catalyst, burnout has been described as a result of IT overload in health. After all, clinicians are not coders. The graph here from that document, the purple is slows you down and slows down your workflow, and the green is speeds up. And the x-axis is age, and you can see, as I'm fast finding out, the older you get, the more you slow down, and particularly when you're coming to grips with a new electronic system. Moving from paper to the electronic system has been likened to a grief reaction. But in the end, the anger and frustration is followed by acceptance, and no one in New South Wales has asked to go back to paper. So I hope I've raised some questions about the absolute safety of clinical information systems and instilled the importance of clinician involvement in design. There are many potential developments in the future for ERIC. Tap-on, tap-off logins, linked barcode readers for medication safety. But there are two things I'd like to see happen. Data analysis available at the unit level so that users can access quality and research data. And to that end, the state group are developing a repository of searches that individual units can share and choose to use if they wish. And after the rollout is complete, I'd like to see a systematic review and refinement of ERIC, like that carried out at the Mayo Clinics by Professor Gajic and his crew, where they refined their IT systems. I'd like to see ERIC refined, looking at human factors, making ERIC less, not more, and safer with enhanced decision support. Because I don't want a computer system to take over good bedside clinical practice. In the meantime, I watch the rollout closely as it goes on, and I try to keep calm and love Eric. Thank you for listening.